Ben, are you going to introduce your friends?
Yeah, like this. 1, 2, 1, 2. here we've got some of the finest musicians that I can find. We got Brandon Lewis on the drum set. We got Leo Thomas playing upright producing on. And I'm playing the piano. Now, every single time I would go see a choir concert with my parents when I was little, they would inevitably say that the choir director up there is to put down the microphone and let the choir sing. I'm not good at that yet, so I'm going to yap on the microphone a little bit about what this concert is. I love jazz music. I've spent a lot of my time playing it. One of my favorite jazz musicians is named Ahmad, Jamal. And his piano playing is really, really lively, it's really light, it's really fun, and then it's got these like wild bursts of energy. I mean, it's some really great music. So I figured I would put together a whole concert of songs that are like just music from him and arranged by him. I believe that tune is April in Paris, arranged by Vernon Duke, or written by Vernon Duke, and that's Ahmad Jamal's arrangement. All this stuff comes from his live music. If you want to talk albums afterwards, come talk to me, I'll give you some albums. But anyways, I think y'all recognize this one. I know I do. It's a really cool tune. You can go, ah, yeah, when you figure out what it is. Let's see if you get it. Is it gonna make noise this time? Okay, good. that one was? Ah, very good, awesome, yeah. I remember watching MASH for the first time. We call it the DW Ranch out in Crawford County, Georgia. That's a fun show, it really is. I doubt you know the next one, but I promise you it's interesting. It's a really good swing tune. It's called Easy to Love, and man, Ahmad's arrangement of it, it's got some zest, but it's really open. It's really open. That's what I like about it. So let's see if we can do this one some justice, boys, huh? You know what I tell you, the best musicians I can find. How about another hand in this band? You can say a lot of things about Ahmad's music, but the one thing you can't say is that it's pretentious. Because Ahmad Jamal is not a very pretentious person. And this is one of the reasons I like him, because my instinct is to be a jerk. And so it's a good reminder that it's okay to let go. And he gives a lot of space for the band, and all of his solos are very communal. That said, this next one is quite pretentious. This is an arrangement of Stella by Starlight, very famous jazz standard. Any jazz musician you find, you could ask him to play. But it's got quite the pretentious piano intro, so I hope you like it. Just a skosh in case you can't hear me.
You're sure this is free?
Oh, man. So I have to admit, this next song is called My Funny Valentine. And if you are ever learning a song to impress a pretty girl, don't learn this one. It's not gonna go well. The lyrics are, well, it's got a good heart. It's trying to say, she's not perfect, but I love her, and she's, mine. And boy, it just does not come across very well. Much experience. So don't do it. I don't do this song with vocalists for that reason. I hate the lyrics. I mean, he calls her unphotographable. Like, anyways. This is closer to a better arrangement from Ahmad, because we play these songs so many times, we forget what they're supposed to be, we forget the lyrics, we forget the meaning of the song, and over time it turns into something else entirely. So I like to think that we aren't thinking about those awful lyrics while we're playing this song. It's usually in 4. We're going to do it in 6, which is 2 more than 4. Hopefully I can count that out. 1, 2, 3, 4, stop. It's a short one, and I've got my iPad in front of me so I can see what the chords are. But he doesn't write. I mean, half the stuff that he does is just in his head. You just gotta know what it is. Anyways, enough of the weird stuff. I want to play a normal one. So let's do Secret Love. This is by Sammy Fain, originally recorded by Doris Day. I did a lot of research on this song like a few months ago, and it was really interesting. I found one version where they do the first part in this like big flowy vibrato, and then they get to the end and they just like start swinging it. Boy, that's some cool stuff. I forget her name. Oh well, Carmen McRae. That's it, Carmen McRae. Look up Secret Love, Carmen McRae. I realize that I haven't taken a second, and I know this is the choir director syndrome kicking in, but I promise you, I'll play some music soon. I haven't talked really about who Ahmad is as a person. I don't know what to talk about him. Every time I Google this guy, I find out something new. But he's kind of normal as far as jazz musicians go. You know, no heroin death at 32, so that's a good start. I know that he didn't drink. And I know that he loved to not play the piano. This guy would start a recording and just sit there. And he would do nothing, he'd just let the drums and the bass run. And if you click on any live track from Ahmad Jamal, there's a good chance that you're just gonna listen to those two guys do whatever they want for 30 seconds before he starts to play. I don't know why, I figured most of his albums were background gigs and he was, I don't know, he didn't drink, so maybe he's like off talking to somebody or something, I don't know. Anyways, I'm gonna try not to do that. We'll see if I make it through the whole song. Here's Secret Love. Ahmad's playing, the reason why I picked him out of however many piano songs, thousands I could have chosen, is because his language is just so fun. And that little thing that from the end there, we can do that anywhere. Anytime I go, and they know it's secret love, and they know what to do, right? So now you too know a word of jazz. So you can speak it right as soon as you take piano lessons from me. And then I see it's for the next lesson. I'm really interested, please talk to me English. Anyways, most artists have their breakout song, their big hit, so to speak. And Ahmad is no exception. The song's called Poinciana. And it's not by him, but y'all know Johnny Cash or who did Hurt? Nine Inch Nails? Yeah, and then it was Johnny Cash did Hurt. And Trent Reznor came out and he was like, you own that song. I don't do that song anymore, that's yours, because you covered it so well that I'm not going to do it anymore. And so that's kind of what Poinciana is for Ahmad, because his version of it, I was thinking about how I was going to arrange it and how I was going to lay it out for the band, and because it's a lot of work, y'all. It's 8 minutes of music. We're not going to play 8 minutes of it. Don't worry about that. We're pretty close. But I just couldn't find a way, so I just learned it note for note. So that's what you're going to hear. Here's Poinciana, Ahmad Jamal. his music. We're gonna do one more for you. One more song. This one's not by Ahmad Jamal, and it's not his arrangement. So yeah, I know, hold on to your head over there. This is An Artist. It's by Bill Evans. And this one is less a tribute to this concert and more a tribute to this group. Because we've been playing together a while now, almost like, what, 2, 3 years, something like that? Yeah. And, well, it's been fun to do it. And one of the first songs we learned, it's called An Artist. I think it's a tribute to a producer. It's mainly known by Bill Evans' version. This is pretty close, but not exactly that. And it's pretty debated on who wrote it. Miles Davis is generally credited with writing the song. A lot of people say he stole it from Bill. A lot of people say he stole it from Miles. I don't care. I play the piano. I don't have to deal with any of that. All right, here we go. I'll put the microphone down. guys so much for coming out. I really appreciate seeing each and every one of you. This has been a team come true for me. I mean, I just want to play music for people. Thank you so much.
Yo, Brandon, is it the button on the right?
The red one, yeah.